the Amityville Horror, a name that sends shivers down spines. It's a story that's captivated the world for decades, the tale of a haunted house, a family terrorized by unseen forces. But what if the real horror wasn't in the house at all? What if the true evil came from somewhere else? Something darker, more sinister, a force that whispered in the night, that preyed on a troubled mind. The Amityville Horror isn't just about bumps in the night. It's about murder, about a man who claimed voices made him do it. November 13th, 1974, a date etched in horror, forever marking the small town of Amityville. The night Ronald DeFeo Jr. committed the unthinkable, a crime that would shock the nation. He murdered his entire family in cold blood, a chilling act of violence. 6 lives snuffed out in the dead of night, leaving a community in disbelief and sorrow. The quiet streets of Amityville, New York would never be the same. The sense of safety shattered. It was just after 6:30 p.m. when the nightmare began to unfold. DeFeo burst into Henry's bar, his face a mask of panic and fear. He was frantic, desperate, his voice trembling as he spoke. He claimed someone had shot his parents, trying to divert suspicion from himself. But it was all a lie, a fabricated story to hide his own guilt. A desperate attempt to cover his tracks, to mislead the authorities, to hide the horrific truth of what he'd done, the monstrous act he had committed. The police arrived at 112 Ocean Avenue, unaware of the horror awaiting them. What they found was a scene of unspeakable horror. 6 bodies, lifeless and cold, all shot with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. DeFeo's parents, his 2 brothers, his 2 sisters. The brutality of the crime left an indelible mark on the town and the nation. Ronald DeFeo Jr. wasn't born a killer. He was a troubled soul, a man with a dark past. His childhood was far from idyllic. It was marked by violence and fear. His father, Ronald Sr., was a tyrant, an abusive man who ruled his family with an iron fist. Young Ronald grew up in fear. He learned to hate, to resent. These feelings festered inside him. They grew like a cancer, eating away at his soul. As he grew older, DeFeo's troubles only deepened. He turned to drugs, to alcohol, anything to numb the pain, to silence the demons that raged inside him. DeFeo's life was a downward spiral. When DeFeo stood trial, he had a story to tell, a chilling tale of voices in the night. He claimed these voices drove him to kill, that they whispered evil commands, commands he couldn't resist. It was his defense, his plea for insanity. DeFeo's lawyer, William Weber, presented this defense. He painted a picture of a man tormented by unseen forces, a man driven to madness by voices only he could hear. But was it true, or was it a desperate attempt to avoid the death penalty? The prosecution wasn't buying it. They saw a cold-blooded killer, a man who murdered his family in cold blood, for money, for revenge. They argued that the voices were a lie. Section 5. A history of darkness and addiction. DeFeo's life was a tapestry of darkness. Long before the murders, he was a man on the edge. His struggles with addiction were well documented. He abused drugs. He drank heavily. It was a desperate attempt to silence his inner demons. But did it open the door to something worse? Substance abuse can warp the mind. It can create hallucinations, paranoia. But can it create voices that command murder? DeFeo's addiction was severe. It had taken over his life. It had destroyed his relationships, his future. Mental instability plagued DeFeo. He was volatile, unpredictable. His mood swings were legendary. Section 6. The whispering evil, an unseen manipulator. What if the voices DeFeo heard were real? Not in the physical sense, but in a darker, more sinister way. A way that transcends the physical realm. What if there was a force, an entity? Something beyond our understanding, something that preyed on the weak, the vulnerable, the troubled, something that whispered evil, something that thrived on fear and despair. This force, let's call it the whispering evil, could have found DeFeo. It could have sensed his presence. It could have seen his weakness, his moments of vulnerability, his pain, his anger, his inner turmoil that he couldn't escape. It could have exploited these, twisted them, manipulated them to its advantage, turned them into something monstrous, something beyond human comprehension. something capable of unspeakable acts, acts that defy logic and morality. The whispering evil wouldn't need to possess DeFeo, it wouldn't need to take over his body, it wouldn't need to control him physically. Its power lies in subtlety. All it would need to do is whisper, to plant seeds of darkness in his mind, to plant seeds of darkness, to nurture the hate and anger already there, to let it grow, to nurture the hate and anger already there, to cultivate it until it consumed him entirely. Section 7. Conviction and continued claims. Despite his claims of voices, DeFeo was convicted. 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. But even behind bars, his story didn't change. He continued to insist that voices had driven him to kill, that he wasn't in control of his actions that night. Over the years, DeFeo's story has evolved, changed, but the core remains the same. He maintains that something else was at work that night, something beyond his control. Is this the desperate plea of a guilty man, or is there truth in his words?